Guys, in this video I'm going to explain what functions are and everything you need to know about functions in JavaScript. I'm going to explain in a very easy and simple, easy to follow manner. I'm going to explain the difference between function declarations and function expressions, and also everything there is about functions in JavaScript. First of all, let's see what a function is. Let me just declare and say, by the way, let me just give you a quick theory about functions. Functions are just some piece of code like this. This is not code, of course, but in this piece of code, it's basically like a subprogram that you define, and this is basically the function. Let's imagine that this is a function, and you can call this function, for example, here. Actually, let me just write this and say function. By the way, you create a function like this. You say function with you use the function keyword, and then what you do is you need to define a function name. Let's just say this name of the function will be say hi, and then I'm going to give this parenthesis, and then I'm going to write the function body, and you write the function body inside these curly brackets. And now everything that's inside of these parentheses is called the function body. And here you can type in some statements. You can do console log, and you can say hi, because that's what makes sense for our function. And in JavaScript, this is what is called a function declaration. Let me just write function declaration. And functions, so this is the piece of code I can call from some code that's external from this function. So I can call my function here, and this code will run. And by the way, let me open a new terminal, and if I run my code or my subscribe.js file, or this file in which I have written my function, press enter, then I get nothing because I didn't call the function, so the function didn't execute. So the function in JavaScript functions are basically objects, but how they differ from object is they have parameters. They can take parameters or arguments, and they can return a value. So you can say return 1, and that's basically how they differentiate from objects. So this is basically what's called a function declaration. Now if I, let's say, call this function and I call this function just by typing her name, and the name of the function is say hi, and also adding these parentheses. Now when I again clear up the console first and then do node, so I will run my file with node, press enter, and then I get hi. Also, this function returns a value. So what does this mean? That I can say here const or const and say, let's give it a name of value, say equals, and now what I've done is this function will evaluate, it will invoke it, this will call the function, and it will return a value of 1 in this example, and this 1 will be stored inside my value variable. And this is the part where I say functions can return value, and it can be also some string, let's say some string. And if I now do console.log, and if I print my value, what do you think it will print out? Comment down below. I will clear the console and run my code again, and I get some string printed out, because that's what the function returns. So that's basically function declaration for you. And now I'm going to mention what function expression is. And this function declaration and function expressions, they're different, even though they may seem like the same thing. I thought to view them as the same thing, but they're not. There are two main differences I'm going to talk very soon about. First of all, actually the first difference between them is how they are defined. So with a function you just say, with function declaration you say function, the name, and the body. You write the body. But with function expressions, they're defined differently. Expressions, you need to say const. Basically, there are expressions, and you can say, let's say, you define a variable to make a function expression. You need to define a variable, which will be constant. Let's say func, because I can't use function. So I defined a variable, and I'm going to assign now a function expression. And to make a function expression, I need to say function. And notice here, instead of giving this function a name, I'm not going to give it a name, and straight up go to write parentheses, and then I'm going to give it a body. So I'm going to say console.valg, and I'm going to say I am expression. Let's say function expression. And this is basically a function expression. Notice that I have this function expression, I've turned it into a variable. And actually I call this function expression and this function expression. But they're both function, this entire thing is a function expression. And now, because this function does not have a name, I can call it by this name, func. And I call it by just writing func and then the empty parentheses. And if I clear up the console, run my code again, press enter, then I get I am a function expression. So that's the first difference between function expressions. And the second things, or let me just first of all tell you that you can actually add a name here. Let's say, call me this greet. So this function name is greet, and if I run my code again, I'll get the same thing. So it doesn't really affect, in this case at least, that this function has a name. It can have a name, or it may not have a name. It's optional. But you may want to give it a name if you want to refer to the function inside here in the function body. So let's say if this is a recursive function, I'll do something like return and then greet and call my function again. And of course I need to have some break ifs here or whatever. That's the first difference between functions and function declaration and function expressions. The second difference is in how they are being hoisted. And hoisted means, let me just write this. Let me just try to call this func, this function expression here before its definition. And immediately I get a syntax error which says block scoped variable func used before its declaration. So there you go, you just saw the difference. Function expressions, you cannot call them before they are defined. And let's try to do the exact same thing with say hi or with function declaration. Now I'm going to print out say hi, and if I comment this out because I cannot run it, if I now run this code and try to basically call my function declaration before its definition, if I now clear up this console and run node subscribe, then I'm going to get hi. So that shows you the second difference between function declaration and function expression. With expressions, you cannot call them before they're defined. And with function declaration, you can call them before they are defined. And if you want your code to have a logical structure, you will want to use function expressions more often than function declarations, because because of the reasons I talked about just now, function expressions does not allow you to call the function here before it's defined.